bottom corner there. If anything comes up, and we can just chat through there. But that's usually the case. All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Cracking the Code, designing benefits that work in both Canada and the US. We've got Adam and Jerry with us today. We're going to give everybody about 5 minutes to join. So we're just going to be chatting here for a bit, but we're going to start officially at 12:05. Thanks for joining, Adam, Jerry. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah. We already broached the subject of my geographically challenged life. Jerry, you're out of Kansas City.
And that is what state, Martin?
I thought it was Oklahoma, but it's Missouri.
That's right. There we go.
There we go.
Okay, and Martin, let's see how your Canadian is. I'm in Toronto, province.
Ontario.
There you go. We got it.
Yay. Funny, sad, funny story about how bad my geography was. But I was speaking at, I was invited to speak at a conference around like 2017, 2018. And it was in San Diego. And my wife at the time was like, oh, like I can join you. I've always wanted to go and check it out kind of deal. And I was like, okay, cool. And like, I'm just gonna get my flight tickets like a couple days beforehand because I'm an idiot. And she was like, she plans everything and does everything in advance, very proactive person. So she gets her tickets, and then like a couple days before, she's like, did you get your tickets yet? I'm like, no. And she's like, well, like you should get it and let me know where you're flying into. Da 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 da. I'm like, she tells me which airport she's flying into as I'm like in the checkout. I'm like, that's not an option. Like, there's no flights going to that airport. She's like, well, what's yours? I'm like, yeah. I'm like, yeah. So like, it's San Jose. So I mixed up San Jose and San Diego, and they also have San Francisco down there. And they're all like, it should be illegal to have. Anyways, so I was in San Jose for a week, and she was in San Diego for a week, and she went with, instead of being alone, she went with her cousin, and they had a great time.
These stories about people who like book a flight to London, Ontario instead of London, England, and they end up in the wrong thing. Like I feel like Sydney, Nova Scotia, Sydney, Australia, like that could be a Martin story at some point, right? Yeah. We're going to get one of those from you.
Yeah, it happens to the best of us. I've had a similar ordeal where I was flying to Milwaukee. I booked the flights back, but I booked Kansas City back to Milwaukee, not Milwaukee back to Kansas City. Showed up to the airport. There happened to be a flight within 30 minutes of our other scheduled flight, and there were 2 spots left for my wife and I. The world tends to work itself out, but we've all been there, Martin.
It's much appreciated here. I'm just looking at the presentation, and I'm not seeing what I usually see. So I want to double check on that.
Sure.
Hold tight, guys. It shows as live. I'm just going to double check on the YouTube side of things. It shows us on live here. Either way we can go. And we'll have the recording. So I think we can show if there's...
Can you see human being in bodies sitting in?
No. Live. So yeah, YouTube's good. LinkedIn is the one that I'd like to make sure is working. If you're Vincent, okay. I'm just going to double check here, guys. And for folks, message me on Slack if you see this and you're watching on LinkedIn, because I'm not seeing it on my end. So I just wanted to double check. And if anything, I'm going to reset it right now. It says we're streaming. I'm going to trust that we're streaming.
I can see it in LinkedIn when I'm on my phone.
Okay, you're there? Cool.
Yeah. There's
all right.
body counts in and out, so all good.
Cool. All right. So 12:05 on the nose. For those of you that have joined, there's a chat function on LinkedIn. So you just comment on what you're seeing and hearing. And that's the way to interact with us for today's presentation with Adam and Jerry. So ask any questions you like. We're going to be answering questions on the go and live. Sometimes there's a bit of a lag, so it might be like a couple, 30 seconds behind or something like that. But I'll make sure to ask your questions on your behalf while we're in mid-flight during this presentation. So yeah, like I said, we are cracking the code, designing benefits that work in both Canada and the US. That's the topic for today, and I don't think I could have found two better people to help us navigate this today. Adam, Jerry, quick introductions from both of yourselves for the audience, and we can go from there.
Yeah, sure. I'll take that one first. Jerry and I are both friends of the People group, but on my side of the border, the north, I'm a Canadian benefits consultant and really help companies with their group benefits planning, which is typically a lot of health, dental, life insurance, disability, as standard planning that can range from companies with all sorts of robust plans, options, to very typical small group setups. But companies of 3 to 3,000 are really in the range of what we're doing every day. It's very fun. It's often seen as something that is very important to people as they join companies. So we like to be very involved and hands-on with that experience for employees across really Canada. We work with companies in every province across Canada, which is very, very fun. I'll ship it down south to Jerry.
Yep. Thank you, Adam. And Martin, thank you for having us here today. Jerry Mancuso with Bukaty Companies. We're a full-service insurance brokerage based out of Kansas City, Missouri, but we do have an office on the Kansas side, to clarify. But we are under the umbrella of Broad Street Partners, which happens to be owned by the Canadian Teachers Pension Fund. So we do have some Canadian ties through that. But what it gives us is a national landscape to provide integrated health benefits and ancillary benefits for our clients, whether you're a group of 2 people or a group of 5,000. We have innovative solutions to align with a company's goals on how they treat and wanted to enhance their benefit offerings. There's a lot of pressure on U.S. companies today, and we try to help on enhancing those benefits and remaining compliant with those benefits and dealing with the state-to-state rules as well as on the federal level. We help on all ends, and we utilize our team to be an extension of HR benefits teams to allow for those teams to then utilize and benefit in their time to what means most, and that's enhancing benefits, helping members and employees of companies, and navigate the healthcare system and ancillary system that is everything in the U.S., a very convoluted one, to say the least.
And this is a theme of this. You'll see, like, I say a lot less than Jerry because the US system is way more complicated than Canada. You have to be a part of these networks and larger consortiums to navigate for employees that might be in different states. There's an old world where you have employees in Kansas and they're all in Kansas. And then there's a new world where you start hiring remote and all of a sudden there's an employee in Florida, there's an employee in California, and you don't even know that. They just kind of move and they tell you later. Whereas we don't have these problems in Canada. You go province to province to province, there's very little interference. Whereas in the US, if you don't have a national broker, it's a big problem as you're trying to do stuff on plans and be in and out of network. But we can get into some of the meat of this and start kind of going through some of the content to talk about that. But you will find with a lot of this, Canada is generally easier on so many different levels. I know benefits are complicated, and we can always unpack that in a Canada-only conversation. But what we're going to do is take everybody through what are those nuances, what are those differences. So when you're thinking about building a plan, we want to kind of end this conversation with how do we make things similar for an offering between Canadian and US employees, but also what are the differences so you're aware of those things, because not everything has to be the same. Same reason you wouldn't give a Canadian person US Thanksgiving as a stat holiday and an American Canadian Thanksgiving. That's okay not to have those days as the same. Sometimes it's legislative, sometimes it's preference. We want to let you know that differences are okay. And let's kind of start at the very top. Main offering in Canada, our plans are seen as supplementary. So nobody is using a Canadian benefits plan for primary care. If you're in Ontario like me, you're using your OHIP card to get hospital level services. And the market has made plans more mandatory than they ever have been. And the market is me and you, employees of companies. You work for the government, you have a plan. So if you go into a private company, you're going to want a plan. The market is doing that, less about us needing healthcare. And then many people who are self-employed just self-cover themselves because the cost of insurance, the dollar in doesn't always equal the dollar out. We have a very, very direct mentality in Canada, which is if I'm paying for something, I better get something out of it. It's less insurance-y than on the other side of the border. So that being said, Canada, more ancillary, nice to have, and some things aren't nice to have, things like prescription drugs and therapies, things like that we use. But when you ask a US compatriot, hey, like, tell me about your plan, they have stuff that we just don't have in Canada in their plans. So on the US side, I mean, there is no public medical sector. If you need help and you go to a hospital, you better have health insurance, or you likely will have a problem, or you will pay a fortune for services. And you are still paying a fortune for services when you're going in, but the primary payee of that is the insurance company, which is the company you're working for. They are technically paying those bills. That is a big disconnect where your primary care is covered by a company you work for versus the government. And we can have the debate about taxation and how high Canadian taxes are versus US taxes, depending on where you live. But that just means your US employer is your lifeline to your healthcare. And that's a big difference between our two countries. So if you ask an American person, will you work for a company that doesn't have a benefits plan option? Usually the people that say yes are people that have spousal coverage. Other people say, no, you need to have this for me or help me get that. That is very common. Whereas tech startup in Canada, a lot of companies don't have plans, and people just kind of say, that's fine, because I can get my coverage from the government if I need to go to the doctor or have a surgery, etc. And then if you look at a dental or a vision plan, those are very, very similar between Canada and the US. I mean, statistically, Jerry, if you're dealing with a US company that is getting off the ground 3, 4, 5 people, how many of those companies would just have no plan in place? Is it like 5%, 20%? Like, are companies doing these from the get-go, or are people really living without these things these days?
Yeah, I would say they're implementing plans in earlier stages than they ever have. Due to the points you made earlier, it's an attraction and retention tool to get a company off and started with good talent, great employees, and then retaining them. It's not just the salary package; it's the salary and benefits package that employers are trying to align to help attract those employees and get them going. So I think it's more so we say them. There's no magic number. There's some groups that want to start with 2 people when they've got them, but some wait until 10 people and they maybe just do some reimbursement stuff. So
and that's a big similarity between the countries too, that a lot of people like, because it's easy to understand. You generally need 2 or 3 people to start a plan. If you try to start a plan with one person, it never goes well. So if you're ever thinking of starting a plan, you got to have a couple of bodies to start a pure group plan. I do get a little,
that's for sure.
Yeah. Canada is a minimum of 3, but there's a hoop that you can get through for a minimum of 2. In Canada, often a lot of people will start plans by just having a health spend account. And that is a conceptual topic that we can talk about. In the US, if you offered somebody a health spend account to the same level as you would in Canada, the person would walk away. It's just not enough money because plans are much more expensive. So let's kind of go down a rung and talk about these plans and what they look like. In Canada, I'll kind of describe this, and Jerry can describe the US plans and what's available in the market, but you'll find very, very simple singular offers when you're between 3 and 200 employees in Canada, which would mean there's typically one plan design. There might be a healthcare spend account added on or some other enhancements, but it would be a plan with, prescription drugs, paramedical care, vision, dental care, life insurance, and those things would be, here's what you get. There's not choices. And the company kind of scales up and scales down with that plan, depending on their internal strategy of how generous they want to be, because obviously the more generous, the more money you're spending on these things. And then between 2 and 1,000 employees, sometimes you're still finding one design. It's very common, but this is where we get into the concept of modular designs, where there might be 2 offerings, an A and a B. You can pick one. Sometimes you're charged a little bit on a per payroll basis for the better plan. Sometimes there's just an A and a B, and they'll be a little bit different, and people can pick what's better for them. But you will generally find, if you're picking a plan A and a plan B in the 2 to 1,000 range, what I'm seeing the design is today is one is a little bit less insurance with a health spend account, and one is a little bit more insurance with no health spend account. So imagine a plan that had $1,000 of dental and $5,000 in prescription drugs with a $1,000 HSA. The other plan might be unlimited prescription drugs and $2,000 of dental, but then no HSA. So you're seeing a lot of employers want to give people choice. When you get to 1,000 plus in Canada, that's where the term cafeteria style really comes into play, where you can kind of pick and choose different components. You might be given a budget by your employer, and then you kind of move down that selection list based on what you want. There's some core things you have to have, but you can pick and choose some things. I've seen some interesting stuff where the company gives you a certain budget for HSA that you could actually decide you wanted to put into an RSP plan, which is pretty fun and different. But until you really have over 1,000 people at a company, you don't see a lot of that. And a lot of feedback I'm getting today from people who go from 1,000 life groups to maybe some tech startups is, why can't I have this? When I worked at Amazon, it was like this. And you get the typical response of, well, you're at a tech startup and you usually don't go there if you didn't want to be at a company like Amazon for their benefits. So companies are trying to do more of the 200 to 1,000 life plan designs for smaller groups. It's just a bit harder because it's the insurance carriers that don't want the complexity when there's only a few people on a plan. But that's kind of the rhythm for 90% of groups in these employee ranges. I'll kind of flip it to Jerry to talk through the builds in the US.
Yep, absolutely. So with Adam's table here, obviously 3 to 1,000, more so 2 to 1,000, but there's different segments within the sub 1,000 setting. We often say under 50 employees, you're not subject to some of the compliance pieces that have to be in place that the government mandates. When you get above 51 FTEs, what we call full-time equivalent employees, that's when you do have government mandates to meet regarding the minimal essential coverage requirements built into plans, as well as the affordability that is required to offer what is deemed an affordable healthcare plan for the employee-only option. But within that, we build multi-plan solutions to offer a base and buy-up opportunity, or in Adam's example here, a gold, silver, or platinum plan allocation. But the goal, especially if you're a startup company, is to build up a plan that is scalable in nature. If you're going from just 5 employees and have plans to grow to a 100 plus employer size segment, there are ways to build a plan that can take those steps and not have to flip your model year in and year out. So we've developed great strategies on that end. But then there's also funding solutions, how our plan is funded, whether it's fully insured, level funded, self-insured, all different programs that are available in the small group market, mid-market, as well as large group market. So it's not just plan designs that we look into, it's funding models. And then also, of course, carrier selection then too is very important, based on a group that maybe have regional presence versus national presence, or one that needs to have just that national blanket coverage, whether it's with the United Healthcare, which is our largest health insurance carrier here in the nation. Cigna would be another one. Aetna, Blue Cross Blue Shield, or Anthem plans are more so regional players, but they developed a national network. Then when you get to the larger group and segment, 1,000 plus, funding is typically going to be on a self-insured basis with some protections and everything. Plan allocation, you can do a lot of plan design development. And then it doesn't require more so you going direct with carriers. You are utilizing third-party administrators, and you can even utilize those in the 100 plus segment when you have a group with and below 1,000 employees. But third-party administrators are becoming more and more prevalent. They're becoming more creative in plan selection, how to fund plans, how to administer plans, and claims auditing and everything. Again, as I mentioned, it's a very convoluted system where there are build charges and versus then what is negotiated by these carriers. So it's very important to align the plan based off where you have your employees, what demographic of employee are there, what are their needs, what kind of development do they need, and what type of scalability do you need as an organization.
Yeah, so
all which you find in the small group segment, mid-market, and large group segments.
So Jerry gave us the bonus at the bottom that says ASO versus fully insured timing. So I'm going to talk about that for a minute. On the sizes of plans, it's very atypical in Canada to have these like multi-level plans to choose from, where in the US, like a gold, a silver, and a platinum, when you're just rolling out a plan to 20 people, is very normal, where people can pick and choose what they want to do. The catch is usually when you're going through the process, it will tell you, you want gold, that's covered for free by the company. But if you want platinum, it might be a $200 payroll deduction. So whereas you see that flexibility, it usually comes with a cost. But it's there right away in the US versus Canada. If you ask a insurance company to give you options for 20 people, they generally just say straight up, no, we're not going to do that, unless you're buying into something that's very different. So there's a lot of similarities, but there's a lot of differences between what gets offered at early level. And that, so if you had a American company that had 20 people that had 3 options for plans, he said, wait, we only have one design in Canada for our 20 people. That's okay. That's cool. You don't have to try to mimic those and mirror them. They wouldn't expect that in Canada. Whereas in the US, they might expect different things in different carriers. The bonus for this ASO versus fully insured, if somebody's listening to this and this is like, I know this is pretty boring. This is really good meat and potatoes of like how you pick and choose these things. So ASO stands for admin service only. Admin service only is for people who say the insurance company always wins. I should just self-cover myself and pay my claims because there's just no way that, like, the insurance company has to win the long run. That's why they're in business. Fully insured means you pay a rate, and your rates may go up next year based on usage, but if they're really high, your claims in a year, insurance companies got to pay the bill. And if you're really low, they get the benefit of that and they've swept some profit. In ASO, if you're running really high, you have to pay the bill later, which scares people with like an unplanned payment to be made. It's harder to get data in the US when you're small. So when Jerry's saying like, yeah, when you're getting big, 1,000 lives, you would be in that admin service only format. That's very typical. In Canada, we really get to see our claims at any point. So what a lot of people say is if I'm claiming really low and the insurance company is not lowering my rates, I should be ASO. And you're probably right. But if you're running really high and you're claiming at 90%, 100%, where your claims are actually higher than what you're paying, that's actually the best deal in town. And you want to really stay fully insured until your kind of claims rates are coming down because you can really win in the market. So just want to know there's no real, like the standard in Canada is typically when your claims are hitting $300,000-$400,000 when you start self-covering, but you have to look at what your premiums are to decide, is it the right time to do it? Or should we get a couple years where maybe the insurance company, like we're beating the insurance company, and when we're stable, we'll make that switch.
Adam, I would also add in, there's a lot more cost containment opportunity when you go to an ASO model where you can start pulling different levers within the plan design and within the solutions that ASO or a third-party administrator are able to administer for your group plan. The low-hanging fruit is always going to be on our prescription side. We even have carve-out solutions that utilize international sourcing, mostly in Canada, where we buy your guys' prescription drugs and bring them down to the States at half the cost. Crazy to think. But that is one of the levers you get when you go on an ASO model to help offset prescription spend.
Yeah, and it's this in Canada as well. If you're designing a plan and you ask the insurance company to do something, they typically say like, no, we don't know the risk or it's too expensive. Whereas if it's ASO and you're paying the bills, they go, yeah, do whatever you want. You're paying the bills. So you want this included on your plan, go for it. And a lot of employees get frustrated, especially in Canada, when they say, my plan had this before and now it doesn't. Sometimes it's just because you had no idea that the funding arrangement was ASO. So the company was much more liberal with their offering. So
I would say, though, the fully insured plan is a nice one big lever pull. If we can suppress those rates, they protect you. It's a single transaction. You pay your bill, claims get paid. So it's not a bad world for those that are looking for a simple plan model and one that doesn't have too many moving parts. So there's a lot of education that goes into the ASO model, of which then, of course, that's why Adam and myself are here today to help educate and then dive into the weeds if there's something of interest.
yeah, I'm in this continuous conversation with somebody who went from ASO to fully insured. Said, don't we always do ASO? And
Did we lose Adam?
Looks like you froze on us.
Yeah. Oh, hopefully we'll have him back. Do you know what he was gonna say, Jerry, as a counterpart? Or
I think it was going to be on the concept of there's not just a one size fits all model of if you're someone just used to the ASO portion or plan solution versus fully insured. Sometimes different experience rated groups benefit from a fully insured model versus the ASO, and flip the script then too, full insured to ASO or ASO to fully insured. So I'm pretty sure that's where he was going with that. And it's always great to evaluate the plan experience every year, or sometimes we look at 3-year visions and making those evaluations.
Gotcha. He's just logging back in here. I guess one quick question just to fill the gap while he comes back. Um, like, what do you see from, like, when you are chatting with Canadian startups or HR professionals that are looking to, like, oh, I just got an employee base, like we just acquired a company, and like, what do those conversations typically look like? What can they expect?
Yeah, great question. Obviously try to align with the goals. Like, hey, what does your 6 month projection look like? What does your 12-month projection look like? And what does your 2 year projection look like to ensure
Yeah.
that, I mentioned scalability and make sure that if it's just a few bodies to start, great. We try to keep things as simple as possible. But generally, we start with a medical plan with a United Healthcare, a direct carrier, a Cigna, an Aetna, a Blue Cross Blue Shield plan. And then we embed some ancillary benefits into it as well: dental, vision, life, or disability, if they want to go through that. But the core, I would say, is obviously your medical plan and then dental and vision. And then as the plan continues, the US base continues to grow, great. Then we can add in those ancillary benefits. And short-term and long-term disability are becoming really important in the States to have that offering on an employer-paid basis. Obviously, we don't have great maternity coverage here. So sometimes an employer may be heavily dependent on their short-term disability plan to help cover the interim for those mothers to go out on leave and help keep a salary base going for them. Long-term disability I often look as the next one an employer should always look into. That long-term protection that an employee can have, especially for your higher comped employees that are maybe a little bit younger in age, don't have many plan assets or anything to lean on just in case. That long-term stability plan is a great one to help incentivize some higher comped employees that are just maybe in the middle of their careers or beginning of their careers as well. So great question, Martin. But the whole thing, keep it simple to start, and then we help develop the scalability from there.
Right. Like, you're going into a new geography as a business. There's enough complexity with that just in general. So to start off with, like, oh, let's come up with the most complex benefits plan. You just want to get to square one first, basically, is what you're saying.
Yep.
And then over time, I guess we've got Adam back, and we've got the presentation back as well here. So I'll make sure we can toggle that back on, and you can pick up from where
Adam, I
you
think
left
I
off.
kind of completed your ASO fully insured model.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, one of the comments too is about disability. Jared, correct me if I'm wrong. If you do have disability for employees in the US, can they opt in or out of it? Can that be an optional cover for them?
They can certainly opt out. I don't know why they wouldn't, though, if it's going to be an employer-paid benefit. You can also offer it on a voluntary standpoint, though, too, of course, where the employee is paying for that protection. However, that does lead into the pre-existing condition limitation conversation, which I will save that conversation for another day. But that is something to be mindful of, where we do see some confusion for some employees.
That is a big difference that can drive people bananas between the countries, whereas you can have a voluntary option for disability for US employees where you cannot have that in Canada. It's an all or none predicament. And if you try to, you can't even say to people, oh, yeah, just you tap Sun Life and tell them you want to have some voluntary disability. That is the individual market in Canada. You can't even connect people to that, and which is a really nice offer in the US that you can do that. So some people try to mimic that in Canada, and then you end up in this like individual segment that is nothing even close to like the voluntary side. But let's move into cost, because old CFO CPA Adam says this is the most fun part of the presentation. This is what drives people mad about group benefits. If you're going from US to Canada, this is the best slide you'll have and see. If you're going from Canada to the US, this is very, very tough to understand. So in Canada, but from our first slide, explaining that medical benefits are really like our hospital system that we pay our taxes for, and that's what companies and the insurers are paying for. On the Canadian side, if you're starting a plan, or even if you have one established, $125 to $250 per month per person for single coverage, $300 to $600 for family. And that range is because there's so many different things you can put into a plan to get there. In the US, for equivalent single coverage, it's $500 to $750 USD per month per person. And depending on how many family members you have, you can range from $1,200 to $2,500 a month for family coverage. We're talking $30,000 a year for health and dental coverage. That is a full-time like equivalent for some people, depending on job market. So with that cost difference, which is all because of what we've explained, it's the primary care. It should appreciate where your tax dollars are going in Canada, hopefully. But the other thing is there's a lot more decision points to be made. A company in Canada can say, let's start it, let's go, let's cover it 100% for our employees, because the cost of the plan is a small percentage of your P&L or your headcount cost or salaries. Whereas in the US, that's a much bigger number. So big difference, which we need to be okay with. It is very common to ask people to pay for the plan, to be a part of it. So you can have many different formulas where you say, yeah, we're willing to cover your $500 a month if you're single, but if you want to add your family, that will cost you the difference. And that might cost $700 a month, or depending on your payroll cycles, $350 a pay, $350 a pay. That would be unheard of to ask for a Canadian, but that would be very normal. Sometimes you just do the regular percentage split. If you're on single or family, we don't care, but we'll cover 80% of it or 60% of it. You'll pay the difference on your payroll deductions. The big difference in the US is somebody's allowed to say, I don't want it at all. I'm going to opt out of it. That's very atypical in Canada. You usually have to take the plan or at least be on single coverage. In the US, you can opt yourself out of it. Your spouse might have a plan. You might have coverage somewhere else, and then you wouldn't have to be a part of it all. Of course, if your employer is paying for it, you should probably take them up on it. In Canada, the movement to 100% company coverage is here. A lot of companies are doing it. A lot of government is doing it. So that trickle into our private market is doing it as well. But it generally depends on your industry, your own budgets, and then your recruitment and retention strategy. I have no preference what a company does, but it is a lot of administration if you're going to do payroll deductions, and it might hurt your job offering. But you can actually have a different treatment depending on who your hire is, where in the US, you have to be a little bit more careful of not treating people differently. The US, what you will see in different models is you can actually create a formula, and then if you enroll somebody, there is a lot of companies have systems like an employee navigator or something that enrolls you. You can actually show people the cost of the plan depending on what they choose or what their family setup is. So it's actually very easy for employees to engage with this. But Jerry, how many companies are you seeing say to people, single or family, we'll cover you to 100%? Is that common at all? Like that is very common in Canada.
It is not common at all. There's a lot of cost sharing methodology, but not 100%. I think I only have maybe 2 employers that are doing it out of 100. So, and that's generally how they kind of look at it. Now they do claim though that, hey, they look at it as a total comp. So they say some of their salaries aren't as high, but they're offering 100% paid benefits. So looking at that total comp statement is very important in the US to when obviously attracting and retaining some employees out there. But general strategy is it's not 100% paid. Maybe on the employee only side, but not for a full family or a spousal plan or children plan.
Right. And it's funny even having those conversations. We say, yeah, it's very typical to offer like single only, and then you pay for everything else. And our price differences in Canada and the US is 3 or 4 times and in different currencies. But again, it's all the system setup. Very simple. If you want to think about this in a singular level, if you have a baby in Canada, which happens all the time, you generally are leaving the hospital with a semi-private room charge or a private room charge. And the semi-private, you can usually get some coverage under your plan. But having the baby, any ICU time, anything related to the delivery, that's all billed through our government plans. In the US, if you're fortunate to have a very regular birth, just the delivery, it's probably about $15,000 that hits the insurance company's bill. So if you assume that, 1 out of X people is going to have a baby on the plan in a year, I mean, if they're eating $14,000 and they're only charging $500 a month or $6,000, the loss exists right there. And that's just for a very basic thing that people are having all the time. So as it gets more complex, I mean, if you have a heart surgery, $0 in Canada that would go to the Sun Life or Canada Life plan, $500,000 that would hit United Health or Cigna or Aetna, et cetera. So just that cost variance should really explain why the pricing looks like this. There is no secret of who's paying these bills. So that's how
Adam,
they get
one thing I will add in is when you're looking at your contribution strategy is that you don't want to put your company in a position to fall ill to adverse selection on your plan, where the only people that are electing the plan are those that need it and that are utilizing it. How you create a really good base is that you offer that obviously to the employee only, at least, to get that good base of employee in. They're taking it because it's a good benefit for them to take, not just because they need it. It's the plans that run the poorest are the ones that fall victim to adverse selection across the board.
Yeah, we tend to tell people, like, if you're going to do that and people are going to opt out of it and you're left with people who really need it, you have to be comfortable that your total dollars spent is going to be low because people are opting out of it and you're not paying for it. But don't be surprised if you get a really nasty renewal that looks like 60%, 80%, 200%. We've kind of pushed people to only take the plan who really, really needs it in the US side. So there's like a financial brain switch that you have to have on those things. But yeah, Jerry and I both like build the base, have a bunch of people take it, and just don't have the people that are going to be your high claim.
I would say 20% more of investment has absolutely offset 20% of increases for a handful of clients that we've worked with over the last couple of years.
That's a good stat. So if we understand the cost side, again, it's one of those things that is a big differentiator. This is where you would never, like, I've had conversation with someone who says, yep, the US budget is the Canadian budget. I'm like, it is? I can buy lots of fun stuff for the employees. Like, we'd get a car lease for everybody with their benefits. So we try to temper that expectation, which is a good thing. But yeah, this is a big difference between the countries on the cost side and planning side. So don't be scared to charge people a copay or a fee to be a part of the plan in the US. That is.
Can I ask like a question on just the dynamic in terms of like the historical trend? Like, there is a difference between, hiring Canadian employees and offering them benefits and hiring American employees and offering them benefits. And, oftentimes the exchange rate is what dictates what a company and why a company will either hire in the US or Canada. I guess, has the benefit side trend always been that, like, there's never been a point where it's actually more expensive to offer Canadian benefits? Like, does it shift in the way that, like, oh, it actually makes more sense to do business in the US? Like, just at a high level, I'm curious.
I'm going to tell you at a high level, no. It's always been like this in the setups of the cost side of it because of the public versus private healthcare system. It, like, forever. This is just the way it's been. If you look at how to fully load, if you want to score some points with your CFO, if you're budgeting for an employee in Canada, you don't have a lot going on in your technology company, something simple. You take the cost of the employee and you add 10%, CPP, EI, maybe some health tax, and then your benefits. In the US, you got to take their pay and add probably like 15% depending on how generous you are with your formula, for their equivalent of employee payroll taxes and benefits. It is a lot more expensive, and it's in US dollars. So this idea that you can hire Canadians cheaper because of the foreign exchange and just the general cost of a body is still there. It's been like that for a long, long time. And some of the boom of the growing Toronto tech scene and Vancouver tech scene, even Calgary tech scene, right? So yeah, that's the highest level. This has been around for a long time. There was never like one of those like line switches.
There's not like, in 08 and 09 or whatever, or like, there's no, this is something that you can count on as a business or as an HR person, not to necessarily change too dramatically. It'll have its ups and downs, but they'll never inverse.
Even I was very curious with that question to Jerry about like how many companies are doing 100%. I lived in Georgia for 2 years, and I was consuming benefits as an American employee. And I remember going to the head of payroll being like, what's this deduction? And like triple circled it on my pay stub that was delivered in paper at the time. And she's like, that's the cost for you being on the benefits plan. I'm like, that is so much money. Like, what? She's like, we've got a great plan. And she's like selling it to me. I'm like, I've never seen this deduction in my life. Like maybe for some disability, but it was, I think, $300 a pay to be a part of the benefits plan. And it was just something that has been like that for a long, long time. So
appreciate it.
Yeah, we won't go into the deep dive of the cost structuring and the cost of drugs and the cost of other things and like how crazy that is. But yeah, let's talk about regulatory. So after getting pumped up for finance, we'll put everybody to bed with some regulatory stuff. But this is important, and this is actually in the people group. I get a lot of questions about regulatory and compliance, and this is where having like a national network or having somebody who understands provincial rules and laws and things is nice to have when you're working with a broker, an insurance company, or any partner. So in Canada, we find it like our Employment Standards Act drives a lot of what we do. We have contracts with employees that say you have to like do a certain thing when they're terminated or they join your company. In the US, we have at-will employment, and you can just pretty much fire somebody anytime and don't have to do much for them. So we have ESA in Canada. We have WSIB, or these workers' comp programs that are required depending on what province you're in and what industry segment you're in. We have things like short-term disability rate reduction opportunities. So if you're a company, you have short-term disability as a cover, and you've never heard of this before, you should probably call me the second we're off this presentation. But there's integration with our government that says if you do X, we'll give you a discount on Y, which is really different than a lot of American programming. We have taxable and non-taxable benefits. We look at things like wellness planning and in life insurance premiums, things that some are taxable, some are non-taxable, and you have to do things and touch payroll depending on what those things are. Also depends province by province. Some province, all your benefits are technically taxable versus other province where they're not. And then, I mean, I highlight Quebec and throw it right under the proverbial provincial bus. They are the province that has the most differences between in terms of their care for employees. So as an employee there, you're more protected, but as an employer, you have some unlimited risk that you otherwise wouldn't have if you didn't operate there. There's also new rules around the RSP, which I won't get into, but there's rules that say if you're over 20 people, you must offer a voluntary RSP plan. That is very different from the rest of Canada. So we have a lot of regulatory, but some integrates and can save you money. Some is a bit more administrative and costs you money. Canada is very, very like similar province to province on protecting employees and also, you know, paying taxes and making sure you're paying into certain programs. In the US, I mean, 50 states, 50 sets of rules. That number one bullet kind of sums up everything there in one shot. You're in New York and California, you have very different compliance and regulatory rules than you might have in Delaware or Maine. There's a lot of voluntary versus involuntary benefits, like we described with disability. In Canada, you can't have voluntary or voluntary programs. You can, there's some exceptions, but for the most part, you can't. In the US, it's more common to offer voluntary things. US, we see a lot of systems built into support because the healthcare system is primarily run by employers because of these insurance programs. So they really do help people by tapping those systems and integrating to get them support. Whereas our OHIP system is never going to plug into your payroll system, right? So Sun Life doesn't need your OHIP. So why would Sun Life work so hard to integrate with your payroll system? And then large carriers really dominate the market in the US. If you're not using United or Cigna or Aetna or Blue Shield, you're probably with a carrier you shouldn't be using, or you're in a very, very small regional state with very simple people. In Canada, yes, we have the Sun Lifes and the Manulifes and the Canada Lifes, but you'll find some niche players you might not have heard of before that are like your plan sponsor. And it's very surprising, but that's much more common. Again, it's because a lot of things are.
Adam, I'd also add in that even if you're with a third-party administrator, they are renting from one of the big carriers, whether it's, again, Blue Cross Blue Shield, United, Cigna, or Aetna. So you might not be with a TPA that no one's ever heard of, but they are tapping in and renting in that network. So.
Right. I've got a lot of fun jokes about small carriers in Canada, but at the risk of this being recorded, shared, and spit out, I'll save them.
Manulife's been on your top list of hit list here lately. So
of course. And Manulife's in my big three. And then there's some regional carriers that if I said them out loud, nobody would have any clue. And then somebody might be like, wait, we use those guys. They're that small. Anyway, regulatory side for US, W-2 reporting. So in Canada, we have our T4s and the taxable benefits, things that have to be reported. Big new one. I still have a lot of people that don't understand the dental reporting, where you've got to put if benefits were offered to you, your family, et cetera, in a dental box on your T4. In the US, there's a lot of different W-2 reporting requirements depending on the size of your company. So just a lot more to look out for. And you cannot rely on your payroll company. The payroll companies are not built there to tell you what you shouldn't be doing for benefits compliance. You really need to involve your broker or a specialist or a consultant who does this stuff. We find the biggest drag is when you're with a PEO or a modified PEO, where they're kind of there to process some stuff for you, but not educate you, but you think you're getting that support. It can get pretty messy. So there's lots of W-2 reporting requirements to kind of expose costs of plan, to do things, but it depends on the size of your company. So one thing I know Jerry's brought up a lot lately is, he works with some companies that get acquired, and he has to tell those companies, well, you only have 30 people, but the greater good has 1,000. you're going to have a lot of compliance changes that you otherwise wouldn't have had, and you really have to get in front of those things. So whereas in Canada, you don't hear a lot of that stuff if you're acquiring and these integration things that the government has rules on depending on how big or small you are. Typically, you think of more population and
we just had somebody chime in here. Juan said one hidden cost of hiring in Canada versus the US is severance costs, which can be significant depending on the situation. So it doesn't look like necessarily a question, but like a statement. I'm wondering if you guys could speak to that for a second.
Oh, let's do it. Keep the microphone on me for this one. This is in a former life before being an insurance broker. I was the CFO of many private companies, and this one was the hardest thing to explain to the American side, that we don't have at-will employment, which means you can't just hire and fire people. We have these rules, bullet one, these ESA rules. And if you look at Ontario, if you terminate somebody not for cause, which is 99% of the terminations, you have to give them 1 week of salary for a year of service. And if they've worked at your company for more than 5 years and your payroll is over $2.5 million, you have to tack on 1 week for every year of service. So if you've worked at a company for 5 years and their payroll is over $2.5 million, the company owes you 10 weeks of pay. That is a huge cost that you might not be expecting. And you have to roll out the benefits during that period as well. And then, I mean, in the US, I mean, people who are personal injury lawyers are seen as people that are constantly looking to get money for people, and they don't have the best reputation at times. Sorry, personal injury lawyers in the US. In Canada, apologizing to employment lawyers are looking for conversations of, your employer terminated you not for cause. Let's go talk to them. We'll get you more. And that could be a lot of money, because there's the fear that these contracts aren't valid and you have to give people more money. So we're talking about $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 of hidden employee costs and benefits costs that you wouldn't find in the US. That is a big deal, this at-will employment. So if you're ever somebody sitting on the fence of being on US and Canada, and you have a US lawyer give you a contract to give to Canadian employees, red flag, huge red flag, because that will cause even more costs. But yeah, typically you're finding that the USA has programs like COBRA that you can continue on benefits so you don't lose your coverage. We don't have that in Canada. You would find a single source plan. But yeah, that's a great comment by Juan. Okay, let's move into some of the technology. This is a big part of people group. I see a lot of people asking about technology, integrations, HRIS systems. And when you're on the US side of the border, you see it super robust. There's a lot of companies that come into Canada after they've figured out US. That's kind of the way to do it. Start there. And things are very, very well done. The company Ease purchased Employee Navigator and actually are using Employee Navigator's software now, which is a plugin between HR or like payroll systems and benefit systems to give somebody a fluent experience onto benefits and then into the carriers. In Canada, we just don't really have that. There's a few companies out there that are doing it. They're just not widely accepted. They can be very expensive. They're only given if you're a certain size and scale. So the US definitely has much better technology and integration opportunities, regardless of your size. So if you're a small company and say, oh, we have to use paper because they don't have technology, you're probably working with the wrong consulting house, because it is actually pretty cheap and easy to acquire. And that collaboration with payroll and HRS is very prevalent, because there's a lot of moving parts, there's a lot of deductions, and there's a lot of voluntary benefits. So I might take it, but Jerry might not. It's hard to track all these things and then put a cost on it. So it's very, very well done in the US. Canada is evolving. You'll see a lot of partnerships between payroll companies and insurance companies start. You'll see HRS systems that are trying to do stuff. There's a lot of manual integration right now. So don't get fooled sometimes if you think you're with a HRS system that's telling you everything's integrated and automated. It's not always, but it's getting better and closer. I like to give some examples. I was actually part of a pilot group in 2012 that was going to bridge together ADP and Manulife to be connected, and it was shut down after 6 months. It happens. Like, it's a big predicament. Rise is a payroll company out of the West Coast that integrated with Sun Life for 1 year until they terminated the partnership, because it was too much activity between payroll and insurance company that was just going to be for a one-on-one relationship. So Sun Life connecting to Rise was actually hurting the relationship between Rise and Canada Life, Sun Life and Ceridian. So they just kind of backed down on it. So there's a company called Effortless Admin out of, like, I think it's out of Alberta. They're doing a great job plugging in, but it's very expensive technology and software to get your hands on. So Canada's coming, US is there. And if you're somebody listening to this that doesn't have that technology integration on a standalone plan, that is probably a reach out moment for somebody like Jerry to talk through the options.
I would add in Employee Navigator. We've been utilizing for over 11 years. We're one of the first adopters of their portal, and it has grown with enhancements. And if you are not leveraging technology and integration, we have a team in-house that does all of our service and builds. So we help and empower you as an organization to have all of that front facing to connect to whatever payroll vendor you have. They've got over, I think, 50 payroll vendors now on their Rolodex and growing. All of our carriers now have integration potential. So it allows for a much more streamlined process. And our build out only takes, I think we're down to about 24 hours now in onboarding new groups, as long as we have all that information. Integration then takes about a week or two. So Diane, I saw your comment, Employee Navigator is best. We agree. So we align there and leverage it as much as we can. And it's been a great portal for us to utilize and help our clients with.
Yeah, this is where I exit stage left. Not sorry, this is not. There's no Employee Navigator Canada. Yeah. There is tools, but yeah.
There we go.
So I'm going to shift to kind of the broker selection page. Again, this is just a little, I mean, Jerry and I are both insurance brokers, but when you're selecting your broker, I like to say, I mean, 90, 95% of the time, maybe even 100 at this point, you have to have a broker. So if you're going to pick one, you should have very quick, easy decisions because you'll be getting a lot of support. If you're not getting support, what's your broker really doing for you? Make sure you're getting supported. There is some carriers, Allen, League, they're doing really great stuff in the market, but they have that direct approach, which sometimes you feel like you don't have the support. And it's something that is probably going to disappear from those companies at some point because brokers do a lot of work, but it's really just, you shouldn't need a broker to manage day-to-day stuff. It should be all working very well, but there's strategic stuff, compliance stuff that you're going to want. In the US, similar to Canada, what we're finding, we don't really have a lot of PEO set up in Canada, and PEO is just like somebody who might help you with all your administrative services, or a lot of people in this group will know what an EOR is, an employer of record that helps you start a company when you don't have any legal entities there. A lot of these companies will now actually work with brokers to put insurance policies over and inside their PEO, which typically they weren't before, because they don't want to do as much compliance work. They don't have as much technology. So I would suggest working with brokers who can access technology, can help support your businesses, and really help you run strategically or administratively. Both of those are important. So kind of rounding out our slides, I'll probably skip over the 401k portion today, but there's just some lingo in here that I think everybody should know and need to know about benefits. Really in Canada, if you hear words like target loss ratio, those are things that dictate your rates for next year. Target loss ratios are your claims divided by your premiums. Your claims and claim cycles and frequency are usually 12 months or calendar year. We have taxable and non-taxable benefits. When you start hearing things like non-taxable or taxable benefits, you better have your payroll involved to make sure that things are being charged properly. And stop loss and pooling, we have this on both sides. But if you're a very large company and you have high claims, a protective mechanism you can put in is paying somebody a fee to take on your claims if they get really, really high. It's called the stop loss or a pooling charge, which helps reduce your costs. You pay for it in the long run, but that's something you can do. That is the most complicated thing about benefits in Canada. And in the US, you'll hear a lot of in-network and out-of-network. In Canada, the network is pretty much Google. You search for a practitioner, they're a licensed massage therapist, you can pretty much go to them. You search for a practitioner, they're a registered dentist, you can go to them. In the US, if your practitioner is not in the network of the insurance company you're going to, you might pay more to access them. So you really have to look out for their network. If somebody asks in Canada, what is this in the network? You know they're an American person that is new to Canada. That's the way you can tell. There's a lot more copays and deductibles in the US. We have very few deductibles on Canadian plans these days. In fact, most plans have none. In the US, it is very common that you would pay the first 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 of your claims as a deductible, and then would have an out-of-pocket maximum, the maximum amount you can spend before the insurance company just covers everything. Out-of-pocket maximums don't really exist in Canada. And those cost-sharing strategies, strategically, one big takeaway, price is price is price. But in the US, your cost sharing strategy with your employees really should be driving a lot of those decisions. A lot of people like to think of that benefits bill as their cost. It's not if your employees are sharing the cost. So sometimes if you have the opportunity to change care and save money, it's benefiting both the employee and the employer. And then my favorite topic, COBRA, which is not just a snake, it is actually a way for employees to have benefits when they leave a company. And it's a big deal to make sure your partner and your broker help employees who leave companies go on COBRA, which sometimes the employer will pay for, sometimes the employer will pay for it. There's lots of setups. But these are buzzwords and lingo that even if you take the time to Google search these things, this would give you a really good understanding of each market and good place to start in terms of key buzzwords. So that's some lingo conversation with 5 minutes left. Yeah, maybe Jerry, if you want to give any closing remarks, or Martin, if there's any questions.
Yeah, I would say, when you're on the lingo basis, there's a lot of acronyms out there, FSAs versus HRAs versus COBRA and everything else in between. And then you get into plan designs. It's a whole nother market of lingo topics. But we're here to help make sense of it and educate not only you as administrators to the plan, but your employees as well. So we want to be that outreach for them. And that's a very important piece that doesn't get touched on enough. It's more so, how do we set up a plan? How do we get compliant? And the other piece is the member experience. Your employee and all the investment you put into an employee benefits plan is belittled if you don't have the employees educated on how to best utilize it and in the know of what is available to them, whether it's mental health services, telehealth services, and as well as disability and EAP program. Obviously, mental health growing need as well. So a lot of programs out there, but we're here to help make sense of them, and we want to ensure that everyone's utilizing them to their fullest.
Awesome. No. Well, I mean, for folks listening, now's the time to drop some comments in and ask any questions. Juan, Diana, thank you for your comments as well. And just in general, thanks to both of you for showing up today. And that was beat me to it. So that's great. This is my guess is how you want folks to reach out. So copy those emails down. I mean, if it's yeah.
I mean, the number one place is People Group. Hit me up in People Group. Shoot me a Slack. Get in my DMs. That's the way I like to kind of respond to people and help them out, either by chatting or just hopping on a quick Teams, Google Meet, or Zoom call. And then, of course, emails for Jerry and I are also super easy to.
Yeah, we'll have to get you access, Jerry, to make sure you can jump into Slack as well, if you like. And
yep, absolutely.
Adam can walk you through it, but yeah. All right. And it's good for folks to just connect with you on LinkedIn. You're okay with that? That's usually how I suggest. Yeah. I see some nodding heads. So yeah, if haven't seen anything come through on the chat side of things, and we've had a solid group of people watching today. So thanks for showing up. And yeah, any final thoughts, Adam, Jerry?
Yeah, I mean, don't hesitate to reach out. And this is a continuing thing to pay attention to as an HR professional or finance professional. This is not, benefits are not going away. They're never going away. They're evolving all the time. There's so much happening. We didn't really dive into some of the things like fertility benefits, weight loss drugs, things that are dominating these like individual narrow scope claims topics. But there's a laundry list of things that are important. And the number one thing people ask when they start at a company is, how much am I getting paid? When do my benefits start? So find resources like me, Jerry, or anyone else that you want to have these conversations with, because they can really help you strategize and go. And that's what we're here for. So yeah, we appreciate you letting us talk about our favorite topic, which can be dry for a Wednesday afternoon, but this was very fun.
Thank you, Martin. Yeah, thank you to the People Group.
Awesome.
Appreciate you having us.
Thanks, Jerry. Thanks, Adam.
Thank you for all who logged on today. Please reach out if you guys have any questions or need any help.
Amazing.